Well, good evening, everyone. This is Richard Waring, member of the PoemWorks community, and here tonight after a summer hiatus to have a wonderful poetry reading. I like to begin with a few quotes that I've culled over time. And I should also mention that this is the first post-Elizabeth II reading that maybe we've all attended. So with that in mind, Irish poet Brendan Kennelly said, "Poetry is above all a singing art of natural and magical connection, because though it is born out of one's personal solitude, it has the ability to reach out and touch in a humane and warmly illuminating way the solitude, even the loneliness of others. That is why, to me, poetry is one of the most vital treasures that humanity possesses. It is a bridge between separated souls."
Mm.
And then our 24th poet laureate, Ada Limon, says, "Poetry has breath built into it. The line breaks, the caesuras, the stanza breaks. It has breath all around it. It literally wants us to breathe. It wants us to slow down, to stop." And with all our mask wearing, it's important to remember to breathe, and poetry can help us do that. Finally, Dean Young, who we just lost recently, writes, "Is reality just a failure of the imagination? That's not what the dandelion thinks, breaking through the asphalt."
That's wonderful.
Well, I'm delighted to introduce Carla Schwartz, who is a poet, filmmaker, photographer, and blogger. She lives half the year on an unbridged island in Lake Winnipesaukee, and the other half in the Boston area. She's a long-distance swimmer, paddleboarder, cross-country skier, cyclist, hiker, and haphazard gardener. Her poems, which reflect life, love, family, death, the natural world, social issues, and the environment, have appeared in Amsterdam Quarterly, Aurorian, Eastern Iowa Review, Fulcrum, Ibbenson Street, Inkstain Press, Mojave River Review, The McGoffin, Solstice, Solit, and Ziggurat Review. That's Amsterdam and Ziggurat. That's the A and Z of her publishing career, among many others. Her books include Signs of Marriage, 2022, Intimacy with the Wind, 2017, and Mother, One More Thing, 2014. Please welcome Carla.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Oh, I so appreciate everybody being here for this reading, and I hope I can dedicate it to the good health of us all and for healing in general in the world. And if people don't mind muting themselves, that would probably be helpful. And I am going to start this reading with the first poem in the book, which is one of my favorite poems. So I'm going to read you a few poems from Signs of Marriage, my newest book, and I'll put links in the chat when I'm done. And also a few poems from Intimacy with the Wind. And this first poem is called Stones. You began with just one rock, mid-puddle of the front yard. We named it Rock Hudson, but then came two more to bookend the mud, Rock Around the Clock and Elizabeth Taylor. I loved the line of them, the symmetry. I never questioned the origins. You'd just arrived there at our sunken front yard, one large rock in the wheelbarrow at a time, until this was no random arrangement. You said you had one rule of rock. The flat side always goes down, so that hump side up, a rock might settle into its new home. Next, you made a line of rocks to guide the Y of our two stone paths. A kind of smile, I said, a rock smile. And you smiled, and the next day and the next, two more rocks to make the eyes. A few weeks later, a nose appeared, a little bent, a little sad, but a nose. Then the effort changed. You graduated from pry bar and shovel to blocks, straps, and a come-along. Soon you urged 1,000-pound boulders to find their new sweet spot in our yard, most flat side down, until I told you I liked the flat side. So we pried, blocked, and tipped together until one flat face shone back at us. One morning, you brought me to the backyard and showed me the aisle you had created with the stones you'd moved. I said, well, if we ever get married, this will be our aisle. And you rolled your eyes, but later handed me something, palm-sized, with a plainer face, a glittery stone of mica and quartz. This next poem is called Raspberries, which are just coming into season. The fall crop of raspberries are coming in right now. And this is about old relationships and fruit. Raspberries. As a man and a woman meet in the afternoon, safely distanced across the raspberry patch, they pick and taste, melt berry to tongue, lean in and stretch to reach a laden branch some distance into the heart of the stand. As they pick, they move round and round the berries, a berry dance. You know how it is with raspberries. You must circle more than once to find what you've missed the first go round. They speak not the heaviness of the years lost between them, begun around some other patch of fruit, not of their diaspora, not their chance reunion. No, hell no. Raspberries, only raspberries, I tell you, these two. They swallow the drupelets, ignore the scratches between fingers. They pinch the flavor. This next poem is called Houseboating. It's a sonnet, and my partner and I live on a lake, and we have this solar-powered houseboat that's kind of hidden behind me right now in this picture. And we go out in it often, and sometimes from time to time we've been caught in really bad storms, and this is inspired by one of those times. Houseboating. Like petticoats, the gray clouds gather, roll one on another, mount to a tower. Soon low distant grumbles of thunder roll one then another. Light flashes from far reaches come closer as we pull up anchor and start the motor. Now the boat bucks side to side with the wind-blown waves rolling. Lightning bolts strike clear down to water. I ask, is there a chance we could falter? Of course, I know more or less the answer. If lightning strikes the roof, we fry the solar from the inverter wires down the charge controller to the battery, and there we'd be together, still floating, wouldn't we? And this next poem is called This Rope. And for those of you who live the boating life, you know that ropes are very important parts of your boating life. And this is inspired by a blue rope. It's called This Rope, and that's the first line of the poem. This rope I hold in tension at arm's length, swing like a lover, hoping he returns, captured round my arms, my palm curled around a hand. Not alone anymore. Now I have a post to steady by, to tie up to, a dour-faced overseer. The two of us tied by thick strand to bring us home, a kind of tango of wrap and friction to swing the stern back, close in toward the dock. This rope whipped at the ends to keep from fraying, to stay worry. This flower bloomed open, bluer than sky. And all of these poems so far have been in my book, Signs of Marriage, and this one is as well. This one is called Equinox Sunset. So we're coming on the equinox. I thought I would read this one. It's also a love poem. Too wind weary to take a boat out for sunset, we amble across the thin section of island, and the pink light filtered through the trees lures us west, as if the deep equinoxal tones make music. A song only the sun knows when summer breaks into autumn, when, like the leaves, cloud and sky display shades of red, yellow. The song we had forgotten rose through our bones, and each time we turned to leave, the glow reflected on a tree drew us back to the sun. This next poem is also in Signs of Marriage. It's a little different. It's inspired also by living on the lake and swimming and paddleboarding, but it's also inspired by maybe having something on your mind that troubles you. So it's called For What Gnaws at You. To step onto your paddleboard while seated at the dock, set your board parallel to the dock, step down into a crouch, the outside foot followed by the inside, and lift your paddle as you stand up and stroke. Paddle steady, strong. Switch sides when you start to veer off course. For more power, bend your knees as you stroke. Take in the sun. Paddle into the wind. Keep tabs on what comes your way. Boats, loons, waves. As the wind strengthens, stroke even harder. Use your whole body. Be in it until the waves win and turn your boat around. Bend your knees, stand your paddle to the waves, surf your way back. Does your bad day still trouble you? Now I'm going to read to you a few poems from my book, Intimacy with the Wind. This is another poem that I wrote living on Lake Winnipesaukee, and it refers to the program Adobe Photoshop and some of the tools in it. But it should be obvious, and it's called Photoshopping the Body. Surely my mother would have known what to do, would have understood masking, healing. Once she used Illustrator to make a rainbow Medusa of my sister's hair. That was back in the 90s when nothing was obvious. She was just that kind of woman to dive into a computer program and wrangle with it until she got what she wanted. For this image of me in my bikini, she would have been a magic wand wizard, smoothing out the wrinkles and shadows, removing the thickness around the thighs, that same belly, those same thick thighs she bore with a click plus drag of a mouse wouldn't she? To look into the mirror and see my mother's rounded body, the sunburst of skin from the navel, the rays, the folds, the darker vertical depression that leads netherward. What I was once embarrassed of for her saddens me. My mother never wore a bikini, but would have relished summers on this lake, to swim every morning after waking just a few steps from shore. My mother, if only she were here, would sit with me overlooking the lake, wearing shorts and oversized tee, an iPad in hand, never mind her belly, and swipe, tap, hold. This next poem is the title poem from my book, Intimacy with the Wind. It's called Intimacy with the Wind. And it's also based on a storm. Speaking of the infinite, the parade of yachts, not a parade, and armada should have been a clue, while in golden oblivion, anchored in the lee at the lip of a bay, we ate our sandwiches until a plate slid off the table and we looked out the window at the blackening sky. The willy-wah that rushed in with the distant storm, horror on our faces, horror in the water, thrashed the boat wildly. Shoes, chairs, waves swept anything not tied off the deck, and we wondered if we would tip. The pummeling rain made for shelter every time we opened the door. Then the realization we were adrift, the wind that threatened to crash us into a cliff, almost broke us up, until the moment we engaged the motor and found out who we were. Okay. And this next poem is called, is also in Intimacy with the Wind, and it is inspired by the Ballad of the Sad Cafe by Carson McCullers, and also by the existence of sweet garlic mustard, an invasive plant in New England. And so it's called, and it refers to Carson McCullers' name. It refers to Amelia, Miss Amelia, and Cousin Lyman, who are two characters in the Ballad of the Sad Cafe, which is really a novella. And this poem is called The Sad Ballad of the Garlic Mustard. As a teen, I never thought of Carson as a woman. Maybe it was that hard masculine name, but I must have identified more with Miss Amelia and her hard ways turned soft by love than with Cousin Lyman. I felt uncomfortable about Lyman. He popped up like the garlic mustard that emerged in my side yard this April. Not entirely unwelcome. The punchy, green, heart-shaped leaves, bouquets brides might throw to hopeful singles. The roots are tender, white, and radishy. I intended to jettison them, but then read you can cook them. I would have to soak the roots to remove the mud. Miss Amelia might have used the leaves in a beer. She would bring pitchers out and pour glasses all around while Lyman stayed on. I could open a pop-up cafe with all this mustard, sauteed in eggs, a mustard pesto, roots cooked into sauce. Then I read the young ones have more cyanide than the second years do. Bad things can go good. I stare out at all the mustard, bags full in my future, and wonder if I can tackle all this alone. If I might one day come to love my yard, if sauteing and invasive is sweet revenge. And I think I'm going to read a couple more poems, and these are both from my book, Signs of Marriage, the new book. And this poem is a very sad poem. It's based on true events, but it's modified from me as a writer. And it's called It wasn't the gun. It wasn't the gun. But today I'm thinking about it. Your gun, still packed up and ready to load, the 22 Smith & Wesson you bought when we moved to Bear Island. I remove it from the case I gave you one Christmas, the case you had taken down that Saturday in preparation for the season opening, that week, that saddest Saturday before it wasn't just another shimmering November day on our lake. Our lake. That's how we refer to it in those thin months when most other islanders had closed up for the season. The gun still smells of oil. You'd cleaned it. You'd cleaned the scope and barrel, tucked the ammo away in the zipper pocket I had monogrammed for you, J-A-M. I was always terrified you'd die by this gun with your hunting buddy nearby. I lift out your orange vest and hug myself into it, inhaling as I do, but I don't smell you. I smell only the house you built for us, my very definition of you. I cradle the rifle under my arm and aim at the mounted head of the deer you shot that first hunting year. I pull back the trigger of the unloaded gun and snap. I want to shoot holes through all we did to cull sense from the unexplicable, the crash that I thought was our running aground, how much it hurt to grab our phone from the slump of you already gone. After the accident, your picture printed in the paper, side by side with a photo of the driver of the other boat, your hunting buddy, looking young and happy with a fish on a hook. In your photo, your wrinkles smiled to the sun, but oh, that chiseled chin. I called you Apollo for that jaw, Apollo, who like you, healed and sang. And as my final poem, I'm going to read this poem called Contemplating Humanity While Swimming, which is also in Signs of Marriage. After a mile, I stop paddling and drift. I strap an orange swim buoy around my waist, then don the goggles, gloves, fins. Like a mink on a rock, I slip off my board. I begin arm over arm on my back, towing the board behind me. The wind tickles the water's surface. In the cool air, I can't help wonder if there's snow on top of Mount Washington. Alan's admonishment gnaws at me. You can't write a poem that considers the humanity of a terrorist, a poem that prays for a sinner, like what Taha does in Revenge. I think about Tsarnaev as a teen, said to have been gregarious, friendly, funny. He probably watched cartoons as a boy. Then, as a young man, his brother whispered, "Bomb." In cartoons, an explosion singes a finger, a wall crumbles, but the hero walks away unscathed. To calm my stitch, I take deep breaths. I'm on a beautiful lake surrounded by mountains. I flip over and swim crawl. I want to better understand lapses in judgment, including my own. I think about what it means to be human. That's my alarm, I'm sorry. So that's the end of this reading. I'll just read that last one again, just so you hear it. I want to better understand lapses in judgment, including my own. I think about what it means to be human. Thank you so much for being here, for coming. I'm happy to entertain any conversation with you all. And I'm going to put links to buy my books if you want to online on Amazon. You can also email me if you wanted to get a signed copy, which I'll put my email in the list here too. And thank you. Thank you all. Let's have a conversation. Oh, thank you, Kathy. That's so sweet. Yeah, thank you, Jane. It's really sweet. I'm gonna get a link to the other book too. Let's see.
I loved all of your work, and I recall seeing the video of the first poem that you read,
Yes, I said,
and naming a rock Hudson. I mean, my son was at a camp on Lake Squam next door to Winnipesaukee.
yeah, yeah.
and they had a forge there. It was a camp for boys, Camp Deerwood.
Mhm.
And of course, what could be better for young boys than a forge with sharp instruments and fire?
Yes.
And the guy's name was his last name was Hudson.
Oh.
He just decided, yeah, I'll put rock in front of that. And, he was kind of a rock to be dealing with these very hyperactive kids and a forge and creating sharp knives.
Wow. I'll put a link to that video in here too, just in case anybody didn't see it, but you sent it out to people, but I will put that in here anyway, in case somebody wanted to watch it. Yeah, so a lot of the poems and signs of marriage, the title, they kind of are cohesively somehow about relationships amongst people and so forth. Not always people, sometimes ducks. But I, I was happy. I'm very pleased with the book. And I hope that somebody might want to, enjoy it. And I hope the dogs appreciated it. And
Well, Carla, I have to ask, because so many of the poems seem to be located in the environs of what's your background picture, Winnipesaukee, but I'm not sure if that's where you wrote the poems, because, for instance, some people write about winter and summer and summer and winter, and apparently Robert Frost wrote Stopping in the Woods on a Snowy Evening in the summer. So what is it? Where do you tend to write your poems?
I do write in both places. And if I'd have to look up my data on these poems to figure out, well, did I write these up at the lake? Or I'd say a good, I know the raspberries poem I wrote in Carlisle, but the other poems, there's a very good chance that I wrote most of them, here. Wrote them up on Lake Winnipesaukee.
In any case, there's a closeness to nature in your work. It's you're in nature. You're not observing it or framing it. You're there.
Yeah, it definitely speaks to me to be there and to write about it and to let that be part of my work. Also another thing, I do revise my poems. So even if I started a poem in one location, I might have been revising it in another location, because a number of these poems I've written, not just before the book was published. I wrote them over the years.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Other
Good to
comments?
hear you, because it's good to hear you read them to get more of the sense of the sound than you can just by reading them yourself, at home, oneself.
Oh, thank you, Henry. That's so sweet. I recognize your voice. I can't actually see you right now on my screen, but
Okay.
let me see. Yeah. Let's see. I'll do the gallery view. Now I can see you.
I think poems really want to be read. That's their final destination, and they don't feel completely fulfilled until they've been read out loud with the breath.
That breath again. I loved all of the things that your quotes, Richard. They were so beautiful. at the beginning. It was very inspiring.
Well, let's hear some more poems out loud, starting with Jonathan Abel.
I don't know how I managed to be first. It's hard to follow Carla. Photoshopping the body is really great, Carla, and also it wasn't a gun. It is so moving. But I mean, all your poems are wonderful, but those really struck me. I guess all these nature settings inspired me to pull out this one. Currently titled Ars Poetica. April, woods, alone, wander, aimless, turn when he calls, high, low, again calls, hidden from me, arms unfletched in my winter jacket, land-footed, search fretwork branches for my bird brother, for the nest he builds. He answers his own song with song, returning, tuning. I can't catch the color of his notes, can't grasp a feather in letters, no matter the velvet air, the savior of my ink.
Mm.
Richard, do you want multiple poems at once, or we're going to round robin?
Yeah, and if people could tell me if they're going to read one poem or two. So you're welcome to read a second poem.
Actually, I think I'll pass.
Okay. Well, up next, we've got Pam Gem.
Sorry, I was trying to get myself off unmute. Carla, I loved your reading. Rich, it's so good to see you on the mend.
Thank you.
I keep you in my prayers every day. And I'm so happy we're back at readings. Anyway, this is called Self-Portrait Demeter. And for those of you who don't know, Demeter is the Greek god of grain, I believe. Good riddance to the immaculate. I'm the windswept nest. My Mecca so fresh, so impressive, because there's language in mud and chaff. I cock my finger and my thumb towards the sun's uncolonized paradise. Thirsty roots keep me existing in uncertainties. I'm free, on my feet, full term, vex and rustle the rumbling herd. I nurture the closeness between stars and firmament, the dreams between dreamer and somewhere in the dusty nebulae, where my birthstone is impossible light. Privileged to raise autumn's better daughter while I hold her tender is the color of my blood. Thank you.
Okay.
Lovely,
Wonderful.
beautiful.
Let's see. Having a little trouble here. Hang on, Pam. I'll get you unspotlighted in a jiffy. Here we go. Up next, we've got Kathy Whittam.
All right, finally unmuted. Hi, everybody. So lovely to hear all the poems. People I haven't heard in a long time from Barbara's, and wonderful. So I'm going to read two poems. They have a relation to each other. Okay, I'm not muted, right?
You're
No.
good?
Cool. All right. The first one is a change of season. a change of season. First robin cheer-ups, a feast for my hungry ears. Spring dawn speaks early. Inexperienced leaves quiver, aroused by wind, insisting on spring. The sky weeps soft tears. Bulbs suckle on soggy earth. Lilies sprout, then flare. Obvious to see, the man in the worm moon, undeniably the high coos moving toward a sonnet. Now we're here, impossibly life's urge to reappear. And the second one is called Heat Rising in Interrupted Winter. The barely touch of my fingertips, your feathery hair, my breath through rounded lips, how it must cool your skin like rivulets, moments pausing in haiku, inflow and outflow, smash into peaks, waves of things wanting to be said. But oh, the softness, my cheek against your chest, the way my cat pets herself on your hand, only less insistent.
Thank you.
Thank you for hearing and listening.
I noticed the haiku action. There's a new company called Data Haiku, but it's spelled differently. And now, please welcome Connemara Wadsworth.
I have two recently published poems to read.
Excellent.
Only the bowls empty. Glass bowls by the stove line the counter. A circle of stars as light catches them. Each filled, waiting, the green and white shallots, garlic's pungent slivers, fresh chives, thyme from the garden, tomatoes weeping seeds. We move in the unison of well-practiced orbits. If our shoes were paintbrushes, would we have a map of our cooking, the recipe's steps in color, the floor a canvas of hues brushed next to or over another? Even as we know the outcome, well-sauced mussels in deep bowls, crusty bread to mop last morsels, as familiar and new as morning.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And this one is from a series of poems that I'm putting together as a chapbook about not an island, but a pond in New Hampshire that we spend time at.
Mm-hmm.
Apparition. Pines and sky frame rippled water in the mid-morning's quietude. I am alone in our cove, deep in the pages of the city of fallen angels, when a small rustle interrupts my idyll. A sturdy woman in a head wrap and long skirt stands at the clearing's edge. I'm just looking for mushrooms, she declares, her accent unfamiliar. Is that okay? And places a few chanterelles in her basket. After a rain, there are many. I'm visiting friends over there. Her hand sweeps across the pond. I know not where she points. My interest opens as she talks and plucks, talks and plucks. I would ask where she's from, how to tell which mushrooms are safe, but like the mushrooms she gathers, she leaves as silently as she arrived.
Yes, indeed.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Up next, Steve Nickman.
Thanks, Richard. And thanks, Carla, for your wonderful poems. The first one I'm going to read actually takes place at Lakeside, so like some of yours. And the first one, it's called What My Father Built. It's about a moment between my parents. I was in my early 20s at the cottage that they had in Ontario. What my father built. A 9-plank Zen bridge, a waterfall for boasting bullfrogs, irises by the lake, thrush's song. At sunset, he cleared the table. Once my mother said, perhaps Herr Doctor might consider doing the same when we're at home. Quiet, he left the cottage, down stone steps to the limestone rock, like a surfacing submarine, lapped by fishing boats weak. He stood on his private island, gazed into lowering western sun, gazed away. I stood just yards behind him, troubled by his brown study, his not wanting to be seen. And the second one, different mood, called The Firefly. These are both in my book called To Sleep with Bears. It came out this spring. The Firefly. Tuesday in the rain, on the train ride to the cemetery. The Firefly. In the tangles of whose fault is it, and you shouldn't have. The Firefly. In talk, in work, in cooking, it parades itself when you least require it. When you forget it, when you think you imagined it, the firefly forgives you. Like the letter you were sure was lost, but never thought of looking on the table. The firefly is there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve. Up next, we've got Thrasos Kalagas.
Hi, thank you. And thanks everybody for reading, especially Carla. I have a poem called Pelion, Summer 2022. In the Aegean, the water glistens and ripples. The sun can blind you. Wearing the summer heat, I hear erotomanic cicadas, and outside my door, a baby scorpion, almost comical in defense posture, 2 claws and a tail, all guns ready to fire. I find a dead bat, the smell of grilled fish, the high-pitched voice of the village woman, fai, cumbare, fai, eat, compadre, eat. There's always plenty to eat. It is a mild climate. The stray cats do not seem particularly hungry, and the dogs are not ferocious. The cop on duty at the station in Volos was the only person not sleeping that afternoon. After the paperwork for the rental car collision, he worried about his 13-year-old son and chain smoked. He was not listening. He said he had trained at Quantico. Sometimes I don't know what I miss and what I don't. The sky is divided horizontally today into a thin light blue above and a mild fading pink below. Thank you.
Wow. That may be the longest poem I've heard from you.
Barbara would say it's 2 poems.
Should all be so lucky. Up next, we've got Timothy Gager.
Hi, everybody, and I apologize for coming in late. So I look forward to seeing the recording. But yeah, I'm just happy to be here. I do a series every Friday night as well. So I'm really happy to be invited in and to be allowed to read. So I got 2 fairly short ones. Nighthawks. Not found on the counter jukebox, just like her hand is unplayable when reached for tonight, the way he's reached for it forever. The waiter is the cook, is the host, the coffee maker, the bill collector, chasing the man right now for an order while she's been caught in an indifferent evening out, now a stalled conversation. The man asks, "What do you want?" As an uncomfortable stranger at the counter becomes worth his weight in avoiding eye contact, but no one can answer any question because they are not about the pie, which is too easy. Baked today, cherry or apple, blueberry was yesterday. She no longer likes blueberry or the diner or the special, certainly not the special. And the second one is a little 6-line poem, Purple Robe. Dark curls billowed into the shoulders of the cozy plush robe, which opened majestically like a theater's curtain, first act of opening night.
So glad you could join us. Thank you for your work. Well, I'm going to round things out with a couple of my poems.
Good.
This is the poem that I was able to write when I was recovering from endocarditis. It's called, "After I Leave the Hospital, My Brother's Ghost Visits Me." Try not to moan in public, he says, the expert on jabs and prods. You only have bacterial infection of your heart valve, he says. Try being a diabetic for 40 years. I listen, knowing other people's pain always involves a failure of imagination. For instance, the horsehair mattress he slept on when he had to move back with our parents, the hairs poking through every so often, on top of all the finger sticks and blood draws. Not exactly a bed of nails, but close. I want to know what it's like on the other side, big brother, the poet's task, but I'm shy about asking now that I've come this close. Death doesn't seem so proud, I say, gentled into a blue-eyed descent. Death doesn't seem to even be paying attention. Well said, he says. Let the penicillin do its thing. Sepsis, I know, can be surmounted. Good to be with you, he says. See you later.
Mm.
And then this is, you know, how sometimes you're looking through old scrapbooks of poems and you're like, I wrote this? What? And yeah, let me give this another shot, you know? It's called The Artist. Sometimes the demands of laundry turn your artist self into a sulky grain of sand, an irritant for your beautiful soul that is already deep in the folds of unhappiness. Life sucks everything out of you. Despair takes root. Wait for an opening, like a sly dog beatifically at the threshold before the wet trash leaves the kitchen. You just need the right conditions for that little seed of sand to be struck by lightning, brightening into a glassy radiance. Your time to shine.
Hmm.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you all for this wonderful evening. It's so good to be back in community with you all. Good to be with you after our various medical situations and summer hijinks. And
That
that
was great,
that'll
Richard.
be a
Thank
wrap.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. You did.
Yes, thank you so much. This
Yeah,
was just,
wonderful.
Thank you.
to
it's
be